For 6 long years, YNW Melly sat behind bars, trapped in a legal limbo that seemed endless, his fate hanging in the air like a storm that never broke. But now, that silence has shattered. A verdict is finally on the horizon, and the buzz on the streets is deafening. Many believe this wasn't just a drawn-out process. It was a strategic pause. During that time, Florida made a quiet but critical change to its legal playbook, adjusting the rules around capital punishment. Now, with that shift in place, prosecutors may be circling back with something far more severe: the death penalty. Here's the real reason it took so long for Melly's case to move forward. They were stalling, waiting for Florida to quietly push through a new law. Now that it's in place, the verdict has finally dropped, and let's be honest, no one saw this twist coming. In today's breakdown, we're unpacking it all: the behind-the-scenes legal maneuvering that changed the game, the high-stakes courtroom, moments that felt more like a scripted thriller than real life, and Melly's stunned reaction when the judgment hit like a punch to the chest. Buckle up, this one's deeper than it looks. Let's break it down. For 6 relentless years, YNW Melly sat behind bars, caught in a legal standstill that felt more like a never-ending purgatory than due process. The weight of his case was undeniable, but the pace? Agonizing, like time itself had hit pause. Pre-trial hearings moved at a glacial crawl, stretching on with no end in sight. Meanwhile, Melly's defense team kept pushing for bail, filing motion after motion, but the prosecution stood firm, shutting every attempt down without budging an inch. Prosecutors didn't flinch. They hit back with force, insisting the charges were too severe and that Melly was a flight risk. The judge sided with the state, sealing Melly's place behind bars as questions about his future loomed large. But the delays? They weren't just courtroom clutter. The case was tangled in a web of messy evidence, procedural hurdles, and legal back and forth that slowed everything to a crawl. Outside the courtroom, frustration boiled over. Melly's extended pre-trial detention sparked outrage from fans and civil rights voices alike, turning his case into a flashpoint in the debate over justice and due process. The public was split down the middle. Melly's supporters were shouting for his freedom, while critics doubled down, insisting he belonged right where he was. The case snowballed into one of hip-hop's most polarizing courtroom clashes, igniting debates that reached far beyond music. As the drama unfolded, many began drawing comparisons to another high-profile legal storm, the case of Tay K, born Tamore McIntyre. His name became a cautionary tale after he was arrested in 2016 for capital murder connected to a deadly home invasion. What followed was a legal spiral that served as a grim warning about how fast fame can flip when the justice system steps in. Due to his age, Tay K was initially placed on house arrest, but he had no intention of sticking around. On March 27, 2017, he cut off his ankle monitor and vanished, sparking a nationwide manhunt. Instead of hiding in the shadows, Tay K seized the moment to go viral, dropping The Race, a track that boldly detailed his escape while he was still on the run. The video, which showed him posing next to his own wanted poster, racked up millions of views and turned him into an overnight sensation. But beneath the internet fame was a much darker story. While evading capture, Tay K was allegedly involved in another murder during a drug deal gone wrong in San Antonio that left Mark Saldivar dead. With that, he faced not 1, but 2 murder charges. The fugitive run came to an end when U.S. Marshals caught him in New Jersey, closing a chapter that blurred the lines between viral fame and violent crime. Tay K's dramatic flight from justice came to a halt, but what followed was a grueling legal battle that would define the rest of his life. In July 2019, the court handed down a staggering sentence: 55 years in prison for his conviction in the first murder and accompanying robbery charges. This wasn't just a slap on the wrist. It was a definitive statement from the justice system that his actions had serious, life-altering consequences. Yet, as if that weren't enough, Tay K soon found himself facing a new legal storm, a second indictment. This time, the charge stemmed from a murder that allegedly took place while he was on the lam, accused of killing Mark Saldivar in a drug deal gone wrong. The weight of this second charge was immense. If convicted, it could add a lifetime behind bars, or even the possibility of the death penalty, compounding the gravity of his situation and virtually eliminating any hope for leniency. What made Tay-K's case particularly resonant was how it reverberated beyond his own courtroom and influenced how prosecutors approach similar cases, especially in the high-profile world of young rappers facing serious criminal allegations. Among those closely observing was the legal team and prosecutors involved in the case against YNW Melly, another rising rap artist caught in the crosshairs of the criminal justice system. Melly's case carried its own complexities and intense public scrutiny, and the prosecutors there were determined not to repeat the mistakes they saw in Tay-K's saga. The prosecutor's message was clear and pointed when addressing the judge overseeing Melly's hearings. "We're not letting another Tay-K situation happen on our watch." This wasn't just courtroom rhetoric. It reflected a deep-seated concern about the risk of high-profile defendants exploiting bail, slipping through legal cracks, or attempting to evade prosecution by fleeing. Tay-K's escape and subsequent manhunt had become a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of the challenges law enforcement faces when trying to balance the rights of the accused with public safety and justice. In Tay-K's case, cutting off his ankle monitor and disappearing triggered a nationwide manhunt that captivated media and social platforms alike. His audacious move to release a track glorifying his fugitive status only added fuel to the fire, turning him into a controversial figure who blurred the lines between criminality and celebrity. For prosecutors, this spectacle underscored the danger of underestimating how public personas, especially those in the rap industry, could manipulate attention and potentially hamper judicial proceedings. It highlighted the need for stricter measures, especially around granting bond or bail to individuals charged with serious crimes, to prevent repeat scenarios where defendants vanish before their day in court. For YNW Melly's prosecutors, Tay-K's story served as a potent example to justify their tough stance. Melly was charged with multiple murders and faced intense scrutiny, not only because of the allegations, but also due to his stature as a famous artist with a substantial social media following and influence. The court feared that such influence could be used to interfere with the investigation by intimidating witnesses, destroying evidence, or even attempting flight. Thus, Melly's repeated denials of bond reflected a system grappling with the intersection of fame, justice, and public safety, underpinned by the hard lessons learned from Tay-K's escape. Beyond the high-stakes courtroom battles and the intense legal strategies at play, the cases of Tay-K and YNW Melly sparked a critical and ongoing conversation about the broader criminal justice system, particularly how it interacts with young Black artists facing serious charges. These cases brought to light systemic challenges and disparities that have long affected marginalized communities, raising questions that extend far beyond individual guilt or innocence. At the core, they highlighted how the justice system's mechanisms, especially around bail, pretrial detention, and public perception, often disproportionately impact Black defendants, particularly those in the public eye. One of the most glaring issues these cases underscored is the bail system, itself a tool that, in theory, is meant to balance the presumption of innocence with ensuring defendants appear in court. In reality, bail can often act as a gatekeeper that disproportionately punishes those with fewer financial resources, trapping many defendants, disproportionately Black and Latino, behind bars for extended periods before their trial even begins. Tay-K's escape after being granted house arrest, followed by his subsequent manhunt, only intensified prosecutors' resolve to deny bail in cases like Melly's. But this tough-on-crime response has its costs. Holding defendants pre-trial not only disrupts their lives, but can also impact the fairness of the trial itself. Prolonged incarceration before a verdict can lead to job loss, mental health deterioration, and coercion to accept plea deals simply to end their detention. For young artists like Tay-K and Melly, whose careers rely on momentum and public presence, these delays can be especially devastating, effectively derailing futures before any guilt is legally established. Moreover, these cases expose the unique scrutiny faced by Black artists whose public personas, music, and cultural identity are often weaponized against them in court. Prosecutors frequently cite lyrics, social media posts, or public behavior as evidence of criminal intent or character, blurring the lines between artistic expression and admissible proof. The weaponization of rap lyrics in legal proceedings has become a controversial trend, raising concerns about racial bias and freedom of speech. Tay-K's and Melly's music, raw, emotionally charged, and sometimes violent in content, was dissected by prosecutors and media alike, feeding into a narrative that conflates their art with reality. This practice not only skews public opinion but also pressures juries to judge defendants based on their identity as rappers, rather than the facts of the case, perpetuating stereotypes and reinforcing systemic inequities. The tension between public demand for justice and the protection of defendants' rights came into sharp relief in these trials. On one side, the victims' families, communities, and the general public seek accountability and closure, especially when violent crimes are involved. On the other, the principles of due process, presumption of innocence, and fair treatment under the law remain foundational to justice. Prosecutors referencing Tay-K's escape as a cautionary tale reflect this struggle. They want to prevent perceived failures of the system, but risk tipping the scales toward punitive measures that erode defendants' constitutional protections. The intense media coverage and social media discourse surrounding these cases amplify this tension, often turning complex legal proceedings into public spectacles where narratives can overshadow nuance. Furthermore, Tay-K and Melly's cases serve as stark examples of how the criminal justice system is still grappling with race and culture in the digital age. The viral nature of their music and personal brands complicates traditional legal approaches, forcing courts to reckon with how fame intersects with accountability. For prosecutors, high-profile defendants represent not only a legal challenge, but also a public relations one. Every decision is scrutinized, every misstep magnified. For defendants, their visibility can mean harsher preconceptions and greater hurdles in securing fair treatment. This dynamic has led to calls for reform, including how evidence is evaluated, how bail decisions are made, and how defendants' rights are safeguarded amid intense public scrutiny. In sum, the narratives surrounding Tay-K and YNW Melly illuminate deep-seated issues within the criminal justice system, the inequities of bail, the risks of pretrial detention, and the complicated interplay between cultural identity and legal judgment. Their stories have prompted advocates, legal experts, and communities to push for reforms that address these disparities, seeking a system that delivers justice not just in verdicts, but in fairness and equity. As these conversations continue, the hope is that lessons from these cases will drive meaningful change, ensuring that young Black artists and all defendants receive the justice they deserve without prejudice or spectacle. In short, Tay-K's run from the law didn't just end with his capture. It reshaped how similar cases were handled and added a new layer of caution, and sometimes controversy, to prosecutorial strategy. His story became a warning sign, a real-world example of what can happen when high-profile defendants slip through the cracks, influencing how the courts and prosecutors handle the complex, fraught intersection of crime, celebrity, and justice. And for YNW Melly, Tay-K's shadow loomed large, ensuring that the stakes in his own case were as high as ever. The fear of another high-profile artist fleeing justice loomed over every bond hearing YNW Melly faced, fueling a national debate. Was this the pursuit of justice, or pretrial punishment masked as caution? While his defense used the delays to build a stronger case, Melly endured 6 years in limbo, mentally battered, creatively stifled, and stripped of time he'll never reclaim. Social media exploded with "You're Free Melly," petitions surged, and fans cried foul, but critics fired back. 2 lives were lost, and fame shouldn't overshadow accountability. The court, wary of Melly's influence, worried about witness tampering, destruction of evidence, or worse, another escape. As bond was denied repeatedly, his case morphed into a symbol of deeper systemic cracks: pretrial incarceration, inequities in bail, and the disproportionate treatment of defendants in the spotlight. Still, the judge had reason. First degree. Murder is no light charge, and prosecutors believed they had digital receipts to back it up. An incriminating DM with Peasy Gambino, "I did that shot," was dismissed by Melly's lawyer as a stylistic misread, but the prosecution had counterexamples from past lyrics and messages. Footage allegedly showed Melly and his crew entering a Jeep later discovered with YNW Sack Chaser and YNW Juvie's bodies inside, both shot from within, near where Melly sat. No gun was found, no gunpowder residue linked, but the narrative took form This wasn't a drive-by, it was an inside job. Prosecutors even enlisted a gang expert who claimed Melly was deep into the G-Shine Bloods, citing hand signs, coded slang, and messages as evidence. GPS and phone data added layers, though gaps remained. Then came the boldest move, introducing Melly's lyrics as courtroom evidence. Prosecutors pointed to 18 audio files, 14 YouTube videos, and lyrics from his hit, Murder on My Mind, arguing they reflected real-world intent. It echoed similar cases: Young Thug's YSL indictment, Boozie's 2012 trial, Bobby Shmurda's interrogation, and even Juice WRLD's posthumous lyrics. Critics warned this weaponization of rap disproportionately targets black artists, conflating performance with confession. Advocates like Jay-Z, Fat Joe, and Senator Brad Hoylman rose to challenge it through legislation like New York's Rap Music on Trial bill, insisting lyrics are protected speech, not admissible proof. Yet lives were already changed. Artists, like Draco the Ruler, were jailed over lyrics before ever being convicted, and some, like him, never made it out. For Melly, the controversy comes full circle. Once a rising star from Gifford, Florida, inspired by Michael Jackson and Chris Brown, his early legal troubles shaped the very songs that now stand at the heart of his prosecution. His group, YNW, built from childhood bonds, saw its brightest talents, Sack Chaser and Juvie, gunned down. Whether this was betrayal, business, or something else entirely, the fallout has shaken hip-hop, raised legal alarms, and cast a long shadow over one of rap's most polarizing cases.